Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to our simple character tutorial. In the last few tutorials, we went over how to make a basic character and create some animations for him. Today, we're going to take those animations and bring them over into Unreal. So before we get started doing that part, we need to get our character out of Maya. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and select the character. You want the skeleton and the skin. And I am inside of my bind pose. Make sure you're in your bind pose. You always want to do your bind pose first. So I'm going to go up to File, and then go down to Export Selection. Make sure we put this wherever we can find it. Looks like that'll do. I'll call this simple char bind pose. Over here, we want to make sure that we're in for file type FBX export. Make sure we have that, and then go ahead and close down my geometry tab. In geometry, I'm going to have smooth groups. Make sure that's checked. And then for animation, our bind pose does not have any animation, so we'll have that unchecked. And then I'll just export. Okay. Easy as cake. Let's go ahead and open up our next one. So any of these animations are fine. I'm going to go ahead and do the idle animation first. But again, it doesn't matter. I'm going to take my idle skeleton. Now what's kind of cool about this is we actually don't need to export the skin. If there's any additions you have to your skin, like maybe he has hair or whatever, you might export those. But we don't actually have to export the skin. I'm going to go ahead and just grab the skeleton. And all we want is the animation information. So I'm going to come up to File, Export Selection, grab my simple character. I'll call this idle. Same deal, geometry. Make sure smoothing groups is checked. These are what you should have. So smooth groups, smooth mesh, and reserve asset content. Or referenced asset content. You can check whatever else you want if you want to, like whichever. You can triangulate it on the way out or whatever. Any of this stuff is fine. Anyway, so inside, so we're good in geometry. I'm going to come down to animation. Go ahead and make sure that's checked. And we also want to make sure that bake animation is checked as well. Double check your frame count. So you can see I have from 1 to 48 frames. And for my idle, I actually have this as a looping animation, so I'm going to hit cancel real quick. And the thing about a looping animation is you want the last frame to be dropped. If you pay attention to it, there's a bit of a hesitation on that idle from that frame to that frame. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that frame just a bit. So from 48, I'll just do 47. And that should be more natural. See that? Better. Skeleton, come back up, export selection. Go ahead and just redo that because I didn't export it yet, so I just call him idle. And then animations, once again, I'll check my frames. Now you can manually change the number, but you'll have to remember to update it in Unreal. So I usually just change it here because it just saves me time. Go ahead and export. A bit of a warning about our curve tangents. We're not really worried about that, just because we have certain rotation values applied. But you can read about this if you want to. Warnings are more or less passable. You can kind of get around it. If it's an error and it says something specific, go ahead and read the error. But a warning you can usually get away with. So I'm going to go ahead and close. Not the best practice, but we will do it this time. Go ahead and go to File. I'll go Open. We did our idle. I guess I can do crouch. Again, I just need the skeletal data, so I'll grab that. And it's a good thing just to make sure that there are no static channels. It looks like all of mine are clear. So grab him. Export selection. Most of these settings should be the same. And then we do have animation. Make sure you have the correct number of frames here. My crouch animation does not loop, so the frame count looks fine. 1 to 12, 1 to 12. Simple character crouch. And export that. Alright, let's go ahead and go to our next file. Sure, attacking. I'll go to the attacking one. I don't need to save anything. So here's the attack. Once again, I just need the skeleton. But if you look, we actually have our sword is parented to our bone here. When you bring that into Unreal, it's going to tell you, hey, you know, this object, since it's a child of that, it's considered a bone. I don't know where this is. So to avoid that, I'm just going to unparent this from here. To do that, I'm going to select this and do Shift P. And you can see down here that a result has happened. So if I hit play at this point, he'll make the action without the sword, which is what we want, because we don't want this sword to go with him. Go ahead and select the skeleton. Again, just make sure static channels are clear. If your static channels need to be cleared, go to Edit and do a Delete All by Type, and then do static channels. You can also do a Delete by Type static channels, but you have to select every joint for that. So just make sure All by Type will get everything. We'll do an Export Selection. We'll call this one Sword Swing. You can call it Sword Swing or Sword Attack, whichever. Double check my frames. So animation, bake animation, correct number of frames, export. Let's see what warning we got that time. Oh, just another animation curve. Not too worried about that. I'll go ahead and open the next one. We got crouch, idle. Let's grab the walk cycle. I won't save. Here's the walk cycle doing its thing. Now again, this is a looping animation. You can see if you watch frame 36 to frame 1, there's a brief hesitation before he continues walking. See that? So I'm going to reduce the number of frames here. Let me go ahead and grab my skeleton. You can see we have a keyframe here. I'm just going to do from 36. I'll drop that to 35. Make sure that both of these are the same number, and you'll see that taper off. So now when it runs, it'll only run from 35 back to 1, and it's a very smooth transition. Okay. Again, if you need to clear static channels, make sure you do that. So Edit, All by Type, Static Channels. And then File, Export Selection. I'm going to call this Walk Cycle. Make sure the correct number of frames. Animations, bake animation. I'm 1 to 35. That's true. However many animation frames you need, and then export. Next one. We'll do the run. So here's the character running. Grab the skeleton. I'm going to drop that last frame because it's a looping animation. Yay. File, Export Selection. Again, don't forget to clear static channels if you need to. Let's see, animation checked. Yes, 1 through 17, that's right. I'll go ahead and run this. This is going to be run. Let's see, I've got walk cycle, run. I did not do jump yet. Did I get everything else? Idle, crouch, bind pose, swords. Okay, so jump is last. Go ahead and open that up. Now the jump's going to be a little bit different. It depends on how you set yours up though. I'm going to grab my skeleton here. And you can see I have static channels recorded, so I'm going to go ahead and clear those off right now. Edit, All by Type, Static Channels. And that should get all the static channels for every joint. And it did. Alright, so my jump starts off like this. He crouches down, and then he jumps. Right? And then he does this sort of falling sort of animation. and then he falls. And then we're going to play this part back for the landing, right? We want to export this as separate pieces. So to do this, I got to figure out what I want to export. So I want to export from the point where he is off the ground. Probably, I think I'll do up to frame 6. So I'm going to drop this down to frame 6. Make sure it's both 6:6. File, export selection. This is going to be simple character jump. Check my frames, animation, bake animation, frame count, and export that. So now I want the animation from, let me go ahead and open this back up to 8. So now I want the animation from 6 through 8 to play. So I'm going to go down here, I'll change this to 6. So it drops me to 6, and it runs 6 through 8. I have to see how it plays. I might just need 7 and 8, but I think that's fine. File, export, selection. This is going to be my falling animation, so grab my jump, FBX, I'll make this fall. And I'm going from 6 to 8, that's correct. Animation and bake, yes. So that should be all the animations. Go ahead and minimize Maya. I'm going to go into Unreal here. I'm actually working in version 4.2, 20.3. There are a few new ones are out, but this should work in any one of them. Let's see. In the event that you don't have a character file already made, I'm just going to go ahead and start a new one. So let's go to new project, and I'm going to do a blank, but you can start on a third person, or you can start wherever you like, but I'm going to do a blank project. I'll just call this demo character, or character demo. Quality, maximum is fine. No starter content. I'll hit create. I am going to be doing a blueprint project, and then hit create. All right, so right into the interface. I'm going to go ahead and hit this 3 little bars here. If your layout looks different than mine, don't panic. I just changed my setup a little bit. Normally the content browser is over here. I just kind of pulled it off and stuck it here. You can dock these windows however you like. But I like to be able to see all of my stuff here. I'm going to hit these little 3 lines here. Go to content, make some folders. So first folder, this is going to be blueprints. Make another folder for materials. I'll do another one for maps. If you have all these folders, then you're fine. If you don't have them, make them. I like to keep things organized, so. And then what else do I need? I got maps. I don't need any sound effects right now, so I'll go ahead and I'll open up blueprints. Inside here, I'm going to do a character. I'll make a blueprint folder for system stuff. And then inside character, I need, I usually make a folder for the character and then animations for that character, but we're going to be kind of simple here, so I'm just going to do a folder for animations. Okay, so that should be good enough. Let's make our character. So under the character folder, I'm going to right click, blueprint class. I'm going to pick the character class. And we'll name him something. I'll name him Bubba. Whatever you named your character. Go ahead and open that up. So this is what Bubba looks like without anything in it. We're going to minimize. And before we go too far, I want to go ahead and import all of my stuff into here into my character folder. So make sure I'm in my characters. I'll go to import. Make sure you navigate to wherever you saved your stuff. Okay, so the first thing we want to import is our bind post. So find your character bind post and open that. It's going to ask you a few questions. Is this a skeletal mesh? Yes, we have a skeleton. Do we want to import the mesh? Yes, we do. And do we have a skeleton to assign? The answer is no, because we haven't imported one yet. If you're in a third-person blueprint, you might have a skeleton here. You don't want to add that. You want to keep the one that your character is bringing. So that's that, and hit import. Okay, drop this in. Typically, I put this into a different folder, like a skeletal mesh folder, but this is fine. I'll go ahead and take the material and drop that into materials. Just hit move here. And I do have a texture file, so I'll go ahead and I'll make a new, go to content, new folder, I'll call this textures. Go back to my character, and I'll move his texture file. Okay. And then, because I'm OCD, I really should just make separate folders, but whatever. And content, my OCD is driving me nuts, so I'm going to make a meshes folder. So I'll say mesh. And I'll move the character pieces. These I'll move over to my mesh folder. Nice and organized. It drives me nuts if it's not. So anyway, this comes in with the actual skeletal mesh, the physics asset, and then the skeleton. Okay. Go back to my blueprints, characters, go to my animations folder, and I take from here, I'm going to go to import, and I need my crouch, the fall, the idle, the jump, the run, sword swing, walk cycle. That should be all of them. And open those. So when you go to import this, it's going to ask you a few questions. It'll probably ask you something along the lines of, what kind of mesh is this? Is it a skeletal mesh? The answer is yes. So if you see the skeleton, you don't see it on mine, but if you see yours, it should say skeletal mesh, and then right under that you should see import mesh. Uncheck import mesh, and it'll bring you to this window here. And then we're going to go to skeleton, and then add our skeleton in here. And that should be pretty simple. And then hit import all. And that should bring in all of your animations. Now that we have everything imported, I'm going to go ahead and call the video here just to kind of break this up so it's not too cumbersome. Go ahead and save everything. So file, save all. And I will see you in the next video.